chapters event of the summer, US APEC 2023, fostering inclusive trade and empowering MSMEs. What does APEC mean to you? My name is Mi-jung Hibitz, Executive Director of the Global Chamber BWI, and I will be your moderator for this exciting and dynamic event. APEC 2023 holds great significance as the United States will be hosting the prestigious gathering in San Francisco in November of this year. Leaders from the 21 APEC member economies will come together to discuss and forge agreement, aiming to create a more favorable ecosystems for international businesses, trade, investment, and other critical topics, including e-commerce and digital economy. The APEC region represents around 47% of global trade, with over 62% of US goods exports heading to this area. Despite these promising numbers, US MSMEs, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, have not fully capitalized on the potential opportunities in APEC and cross-border. The question that lies before us is this: what does APEC 2023 mean to you as MSMEs? And how can APEC support and empower your businesses to seize the market opportunity that exists within APEC regions? We have the privilege of welcoming of the United States to APEC as our keynote speaker. Following that, we have a panel of luminous experts who will explore and provide insight into the answers to these important questions. So before we kick off, I want to recognize our generous sponsors whose support has made this exciting gathering possible. A big thank you to our sponsor, as well as our co-host, the Thunderbird ASU, ranked #1 in international trade by QS, the premier global higher education analyst organization. We also extend our appreciation to our global sponsor, Cultural Vista, a nonprofit exchange organization promoting global understanding and collaboration among individuals and institutions. A special thank you to our silver sponsor, Clements Worldwide, a trusted provider of international insurance for expats, diplomats, and organizations in over 170 countries. We also thank you to our bronze sponsor, to Trade Monitor, the world's top supplier of trade statistics to government, corporation, manufacturer, law firms, trade association, and international organizations on 6 continents. So thank you again to these remarkable sponsors for their support. So now it's my honor to introduce 2 extraordinary global leaders from the hosting organizations. Joining us from all the way the Phoenix, Arizona, we have Doug Brunke, the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and Andy Pagram, the Director General of Thunderbird. So Doug, are you available for sharing a little bit of welcome remarks with us?
It's my pleasure, Mi-jung. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We're headquartered inside Thunderbird School of Global Management in sunny and cool Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you, Dr. Kagram, for your leadership and collaboration always, including yesterday and all the things we did yesterday. You're amazing. Thank you to all of the speakers and organizers today. Thank you so much to Cultural Vistas and Clements Worldwide and Trade Data Monitor for your help and support. Every day, Global Chamber makes endless connections for our members to find and gain new business. And we encourage more leaders to be involved in global business. Only 1 in 100 US companies exports. And of those, less than 50% of those export to more than one country, and less than 50% of those go to countries outside of Mexico, Canada. So you can see the opportunity. It's all around us. Not enough people participate in it. Not enough people are successful with it. Our goal every day is to help companies succeed, more companies to be involved. Thank you, Mijong, for your efforts in this effort. Very important effort for not just the United States, but for all countries and all people around the world. Thank you for your work, Mijong.
Thank you very much, Doug. And now we welcome Kagram from Phoenix again, cool Phoenix. Dr. Kagram.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Hibbets, and our incredible president of the Global Chamber, Doug Brunke, is a global and unstoppable force, as is he and the Chamber more generally. Guests and panelists, especially our speakers, and in particular, Mr. Murray, who's really been a lead in trade and global connections, advancing sustainable peace and prosperity worldwide. For those of you who don't know much about the Thunderbird School of Global Management, we were actually founded in 1946 by Thunderbird Air Force pilots that came back from World War II. Having seen the horrors of that war and witnessed it and engaged in it, they came back and built arguably the world's first ever truly international trade and diplomacy school, of all places in hot Arizona, in the Thunderbird Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona. I bring this up because that is 77 years of tradition, history, legacy, engagement. Those first generation, in fact, of T-Birds went on to lead and manage the Marshall Plan and the rebuilding of Europe. And we were founded on a phrase, a motto, a theme, a DNA, encapsulated by the following words: borders frequented by trade and diplomacy seldom need soldiers. And in particular, seldom need soldiers. What could be more appropriate than this particular event? Our partnership with the Global Chamber, obviously what APEC is all about, and the opportunities for the APEC Summit in San Francisco. As Mijong mentioned, we're very proud because we were just ranked 77 years later in the inaugural ranking of QS World University Rankings, the premier ranking in our business, global education, as the #1 school in international trade ahead of 199 other incredibly distinguished institutions, which I won't name, but you all know. And that's because of our commitment, dedication to bringing the world together with international trade, a global mindset, harnessing digital and new technologies, but doing so with a set of ethical foundations. And let me end with that. We have 3 fundamental principles at Thunderbird. We oppose all forms of corruption and exploitation. We respect the rights and dignity of all peoples, and we advance sustainable and equitable prosperity and peace worldwide. At Thunderbird and ASU, not only do you get #1 of international trade, but the #1 university for innovation in the United States. And we think about the 3 I's of the APEC Summit: interconnected, innovative, and inclusive. We believe that at Thunderbird and ASU, that's exactly what we are: globally interconnected, innovative, and inclusive. So we're so honored and privileged to co-host this with the incredible Global Chamber. We thank all the sponsors, and particularly our distinguished speaker, Mr. Murray, for his leadership. And I want to thank, in my last comment, my incredible colleague, Professor Landry Signier. He's our leader in DC. He's a true global leader in every way. Young global leader with World Economic Forum, one of the most distinguished professors at Thunderbird, ASU, and worldwide. And you're in wonderful hands with him. I'm sorry I can't join you in person, but Doug and I decided to hang out in the pool instead here in Arizona. Thank you all very much. Please stay safe and healthy. Back to you, Zhejiang.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kagram, for a very insightful and then a warm, the welcome remarks. And now it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Matt Murray, the U.S. senior official for APEC, appointed in February 2022. He expertly coordinates U.S. participation in APEC and oversees the Office of Economic Policy in the State Department's Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Previously, Mr. Murray led the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs and has served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Trade Policy and Negotiations. with a strong focus on U.S. economic engagement in Asia Pacific region. He has held key positions at the U.S. Embassy, including Minister Counselor for Economic Affairs in and Counselor of Economic Affairs in Canberra. As a senior foreign service officer with extensive overseas experience and master's degree from the U.S. Army War College and the University of Pittsburgh, Mr. Murray is dedicated to advancing U.S. interests on the global stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Murray.
Well, thank you, Mi Zhang, very, very much. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Sanjeev, cool and I don't know, frigid Arizona out there. Really, this is a fantastic opportunity for me to be here with all of you. I'm going to share some information today, but I really find that these opportunities are a great chance for me and for our team to learn quite a lot, because at the end of the day, you know, APEC, as well we'll describe it, is a large diplomatic entity with these other 20 economies around the region. But what we want to be able to do is walk into those meetings, walk into those engagements by really knowing what it is that you all as small and medium-sized enterprises care about, how we can be helping you throughout, you know, especially our host year. I also, if I may draw it's a little bit of a fuzzy line, but sometimes I feel like when you are asked to do something like host an enterprise APEC, you are a top office in a corner of the State Department. It's almost like being a small and medium-sized enterprise and trying to ramp up to scale very, very quickly. I just kind of smiled a minute ago when Sanjeev mentioned you know, that we're looking to advance an interconnected, innovative, inclusive Asia Pacific region. That alliteration, among other, was part of a whiteboarding exercise that about did in a room and a half. You know, and we're now, as we get closer to the our host year, we're now up to about 150 people across the U.S. government who are working on APEC, you know, quite a bit. And that number is going to grow even more as we get closer to the summit in San Francisco. So I do feel a little bit of a kinship with small and medium-sized enterprises, especially as we try to take what, you know, our little office and really host something as large as APEC this year. So let me talk a little bit about APEC and what it is and why I think it matters. And again, how we want to be able to carry forward any of the things that you all care about into those meetings. But, you know, when you look at APEC from sort of the big picture diplomatic perspective, it is an opportunity for us to engage with like-minded partners and friends around the region. APEC includes 20 other economies. It's been around since 1989. The United States has hosted on 2 previous occasions, in 1993 and in 2011. And it's really an opportunity then to be able to bring all of these like-minded partners and friends and allies to the United States for discussions. But it's not just all like-minded partners and allies, economies that are there. And we'll talk in a minute about who's in APEC. But you also have China, you also have Russia, you also have some of our Southeast Asian friends where we're just growing relationships. And so tremendous opportunity to be able to work with all of them. Leadership in the region. You know, this is an opportunity, speaking as a diplomat, to be able to say, look, we're going to bring all of these folks to the United States. We're going to show off the best that the United States has to offer. This is about demonstrating in the United States, our economy's interconnectedness, innovation, and inclusion. And so this is a real, but at the end of the day, it's really going to matter and use this vehicle to drive forward on specific economic outcomes. And so I want to talk a bit about that because that's where I think it really does matter a lot for small and medium enterprises. Let's see here. Are we going to the right or, sorry, clicker? Ironically, I just came from a presentation where the person couldn't do the PowerPoint. We were all kind of poking fun at him, and then I can't do the PowerPoint. But anyway, so again, I was talking about the membership. I think it's important to, to highlight this. APEC matters into the region. You've got 21 member economies, as Mijong was saying earlier, 40% of global population, nearly half of global GDP. APEC economies are the destination for more than 60% of, and in addition, we did some work on this earlier this year with the Department of Commerce. They're also the source of direct investment into the United States of approximately $1.7 trillion. So, and a lot of that investment is coming in what we would refer to as the industries of the future. So it's a lot of your EV battery makers, semiconductors, et cetera, all that's coming in. Services exports, also really important in the APEC region, about 35% of our services exports, and 7 of our top 10 trading partners are in the Asia Pacific region, APEC. So our top 5, I just mentioned services, our top 5 services markets in APEC are Canada, China, Japan, Mexico, and Singapore. So it's that kind of mix of economies. So as I said, we had, here I go with this is what I get for being critical of somebody else's PowerPoint. Anyway, so as we get into, APEC theme and priorities, we did really want to both match up with where APEC is right now as an organization and where it's come from over the last 30 years, but also obviously match this up with the priorities of the Biden administration. And so our theme for our APEC 2023 year is creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. And as we talked about, our policy priorities include advancing an interconnected, innovative, and inclusive Asia-Pacific region. And so APEC, has a number of different work streams all across it, has a number of different ministerials. We'll get into the schedule in a minute. But just to give you a flavor for some of the topics that we focus on and work across, it includes trade and investment facilitation, the digital economy, health, gender equity and gender equality, clean energy and climate, anti-corruption, food security. So it's a very broad agenda. We definitely want to be a good steward of APEC in our host year and lift up as well the important accomplishments of our predecessors as hosts. So our theme and objectives also very much to seek to capitalize on progress that Thailand made in the last APEC year in 2022 and build on also the 3 decades plus of APEC success prior to that. In the aftermath of COVID in particular, Secretary Blinken has said we really want to leverage our US APEC host year to meet the moment that we're in and try to address many of these priorities. So when we look about you all in this room online are the engines of innovation in the United States and across the region, the driving forces of growth and really powerhouses in a lot of the APEC economies. MSMEs and SMEs is an issue that resonates all across the region, from the United States to Peru to the Philippines. A lot of these economies are real champions of trying to promote MSMEs, and in a lot of these economies, MSMEs account for between 40 and 60% of their GDPs. So it is a critical issue across the region. But as was noted earlier in the opening remarks, they may only account for 35% or less of exports. And so as I think Mijong highlighted this, as the Global Chamber of Commerce has noted, US MSMEs perhaps have not taken, full advantage of opportunities to export, but there's also reasons why. There's a lot of barriers there. There's a lot of challenges there. And that's what we want to try to get at as well. So within APEC, it's one of the few multilateral organizations that I know of that has a small and medium-sized enterprises working group. It also has a small and medium-sized enterprises ministerial because it really wants to aim to focus on supporting the sustainability and resilience of innovative MSMEs. APEC economies endorsed a group strategic plan for 2021 to 2024. Which includes a roadmap to address important agendas for MSMEs with priorities such as better business environments for entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, innovation, and startups, opportunities for youth, women, and underserved communities, the internationalization of MSMEs, including access to international markets and global value chains, trade facilitation and leveraging trade agreements for MSMEs, access to finance and alternative financial solutions and promotion of new financial technologies for MSMEs, green awareness to enhance MSME competitiveness, and government to business interaction and MSME competitiveness in government procurement. Accordingly, since 2020, APEC has made progress on some projects, including to relieve MSME financial difficulties, especially coming out of the COVID pandemic, increasing their access to credit mediation, engaging with indigenous businesses as well, building MSME capacity in bio, green, digital, and care economies, and supporting MSMEs to serve as sustainable players in economic recovery. As we know, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, MSMEs in the APEC region faced considerable challenges, but also demonstrated incredible strength and resilience in the face of these challenges. For APEC this year, it is crucial to support MSMEs and lift trade barriers to. So in the US APEC 2023 host year, we've really encouraged larger companies to also connect with women entrepreneurs, minority-owned businesses, and women-owned MSMEs so that both can benefit from expanded partnerships and enhanced supply chains. I've often said when I've gone out to events with the private sector that we really see that public-private collaboration as the secret sauce of what makes APEC work and has made it work over the last 30 years. But obviously, that's not as rich or as diverse of a group if we're not including also MSMEs, given the importance that they play in these economies. So we've continuously stressed, the importance of a foreign policy for the middle class, which is something that Secretary Blinken has talked about, building from the bottom up and the middle out, which is something that President Biden has definitely emphasized. And that should, we hope, allow and support risk-taking, incubating entrepreneurs, and reducing social barriers for women and minority-owned businesses as well. So we have, I think, throughout the year, and I won't go through every example here, but we've really tried to, focus throughout our entire host year on MSMEs in various fora. And I think, even the most enthusiastic APEC watcher or, someone who cares about APEC, they only think about the summit, the leaders meeting, right? Like that's the way I was before I came into this job, and then realized, oh, there's a whole year worth of these meetings. So across the full year, we have 5 different clusters of meetings in cities around the United States. That includes 10 ministerial meetings. We've had 2 in Detroit in May. We're going to have 6 more in Seattle in August, and then a couple more just prior to the leaders meeting in San Francisco in November. It also includes at my level, senior officials level, sort of ambassador level meetings, 4 of those around actually 5 around the year. And then, of course, the leaders come together, and this year it'll be in San Francisco. That also goes with, there's a large APEC CEO Summit, which is a great place for the private sector to engage, not just large companies, but also small and medium-sized enterprises. And so there's, a lot of different chances to engage throughout the year. Also, importantly, is an organization that really has a lot of technical level expertise. So what I love about it is it's not just top down, but it's also bottom up. So across the course of any year, you have anywhere between 300-ish and 500-ish kind of meetings of working groups, technical level experts, et cetera. In Seattle alone, we're going to have, I think it's 240 different meetings of local level experts, and I'll talk more about Seattle in a second. But as we've tried to highlight, MSMEs, for example, in February in Palm Springs, APEC economies really focused on engaging with MSMEs and women-owned firms as natural partners in supporting sustainability goals and address challenges in building MSMEs capacity to comply with emerging market rules and requirements when it comes to digitalizing MSMEs. In Detroit in May, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg hosted a roundtable on minority bank financing in the electric vehicle transition, discussing how APEC economies can include enterprises owned by underrepresented and underserved groups in innovative transitions and the impacts at the local level. In addition to those meetings in Palm Springs and Detroit, we've also spent the first half of the year traveling around to different cities, including Pittsburgh and Atlanta and Rockville, Maryland. If you haven't met Sue Koo there in the back from our team, that's the one thing you should do today is meet Sue, because she's done a great job of getting us out through a program called APEC Connect, including connecting with Mi Jong for this event today. and really wanting to have a diverse set of inputs from MSMEs at a lot of those meetings. And so going forward, again, on the calendar, we're focused on the upcoming meetings in Seattle. Our team's going to start heading out there very shortly. And so I mentioned there's going to be 6 ministerials there. That will include the SME ministerial. The SME ministerial also, for the first time, will have a day of overlap with the Women in Economy Forum. The Women in Economy Forum is something that we launched in our host year in 2011 to try to advance women's economic participation around the region. And very excited about that. There's also a health ministerial, an energy ministerial, a food security ministerial, and a disaster resilience, a disaster management ministerial, all being hosted by U.S. government agencies that have those respective portfolios. And then, of course, we'll conclude the meetings in San Francisco during Leaders Week, so we'll have the CEO Summit, and there will be a number of other events that'll be coming up and being scheduled for stakeholders as well. And then I wanted to highlight another thing about Seattle real quickly as I kind of close out here. But one thing that we're really focused on is the digital economy. Every single business I meet with, whether large or small or somewhere in between, talks about being a digital economy in this day and age. There are challenges that are across the region, and of course, if you polled the 21 different economies of APEC and asked them what a healthy digital economy looks like, you might get 21 different answers, right? But that's why we need to have these conversations, and that's why we need to have these discussions and try to advance a shared agenda, and try to get a consensus on some things. So Seattle will be a perfect backdrop for something that we're going to refer to as APEC Digital Month. We also have an accompanying Digital Pacific agenda that we've circulated to all the other economies. And we're partnering with a lot of private sector entities, with small and medium-sized enterprises in particular, because we want to work with the private sector to bring underserved individuals and MSMEs into the digital economy, and so addressing many of these challenges. So there is a QR code on the screen, which takes you to sort of the schedule of events for Digital Month, which is also on our website at state.gov/US APEC 2023, which I'll put up here in a second, I think. But this will be the first opportunity that we'll be able to get at issues, including through a workshop on legal and regulatory interoperability for privacy protections in APEC and the impact on MSMEs, or a women and e-commerce conference, or there will also be the 2023 APEC App Challenge to help, where the theme is helping MSMEs participate in global digitally enabled trade and the international marketplace. These are just a few examples of things that we really want to highlight. And so here's, obviously the screen with all of the different ways you can connect with us. We really have tried to make stakeholder engagement a significant part of what we're doing, especially as hosts this year. Because again, if I'm going into a meeting, if my colleagues are going into meetings with all these other economies, we really do want to hear what it is that you all think we should be doing, or what we should be saying, or what we should be pushing for. APEC is a consensus-based, non-binding organization. It's a little bit wonky. It's, a lot of it's been online the last couple of years, like everything else because of COVID. But we see this as a real opportunity as hosts to, again, be able to show that leadership, but also drive forward towards economic policy outcomes that really matter for all of you. So I hope that today, in addition to any questions you may have for me, I hope that you'll also feel free to offer any inputs that you have or thoughts that you have on the kinds of things. I didn't touch on everything today, but the kinds of things that you think would be the most helpful for us to be focusing on, because again, you all are such an important part of these economies around the region, including ours. And so really do want to make sure that we're representing all of you when we go into these meetings. So I'll stop there and thank you very much. Sure.
Oh,
am I here or there? Okay, here. Okay.
Because of time constraint, we don't have a lot of time, but I believe you have some great questions for Mr. Murray. And please raise your hand when you have a question, great. And just briefly mention your name and your affiliation. And This is a question, not comment. So let's make it more, inclusive as much as possible. So back there, let's pass.
Hello, Eunjung Cho with the Voice of America Korean Service. APEC member nations are all impacted by US-China in the economy area, and there are conflicting signals coming out from the United States. US is de-risking from China, but at the same time, especially with the recent high-level visits to China, US is also at the same time trying to manage relations with China as well. So in this, when this is sending conflicting signals, how can South Korea and other major chip makers seek their best national interests? And my second question is, how can APEC countries together promote semiconductor supply chain resiliency? Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. So on China, as you've said, there's been a lot of engagement at very high levels with China recently. So Secretary Blinken was just there recently. Treasury Secretary Yellen was there. We also have a special envoy for climate, John Kerry, in Beijing this week. And so, there is a lot of engagement that's going on with China. I think certainly, we do need to find a way to manage the relationship with China, especially on the economic and trade side, so that we're able to take each other's concerns into account. Certainly in the APEC perspective, China is a very important member. I meet with my Chinese counterpart every single time that we have APEC meetings, and also have a lot of communication with her, virtually and by email and everything. So there's a lot of dialogue, going on with China. I think in an APEC context, one of the really important things is to recognize that there are 21 members, that it's not just about the United States and China. So certainly as host, this year, we have really tried to make sure that all members have an opportunity to share their views, to offer input into the agenda, that when I'm speaking, I'm not just speaking to a Chinese official across the room, but I'm speaking to all the economies that are in the room, because I think that's really important. You mentioned Korea. Korea plays a tremendously important role in the global economy right now and in the region's economy. I had a chance not long ago with Sue to tour the SK battery factory in northern Georgia, which is an amazing facility. And there's just so much positive things that are happening with some of these other economies, that we want to make sure that we're engaging everybody, and that we're also using APEC as a platform to really encourage that kind of engagement. And one of the ways we're doing that is focusing on supply chain resiliency, not necessarily focusing on specific sectors like semiconductors, but just looking at, we have a supply chain resiliency action plan. And what are some of the practical things that we can all agree to with China in the room, with Korea in the room, with the United States in the room, and with many other partners in the room, where we can, take some positive steps to in the region, particularly in some of the critical areas and critical supply chains. So I think there's a lot of work that's happening. And I think the key thing about APEC is it gives us a great platform to have these discussions, many times throughout the year, and to really try to drive forward on some consensus approaches. And so we're very excited about that.
APEC Summit and other APEC meetings?
So I think on that, I mean, we raised that in a number of different areas. I think certainly what APEC has talked about and focused on is that, there are international rules and norms that we all want to abide by in the way that we, work on global trade and global investment. And so we really do want to make sure that we're speaking to all of the economies, again, all 21, about concerns around any sort of coercive practices by anybody.
Everything on schedule, so we'll just take one more. But I just want to let you know Mr. Marie will be available even after the panel discussion when you open the floor as well. So you can ask a question then. But if you have one more question.
afternoon. I had to look at my watch. Great. Thank you for your remarks. Denise Simmons, ex-World Bank and African Development Bank, and I'm currently a non-resident fellow at Land Council. Quick question. There's been a lot of talk, maybe because of geopolitics, about a China +1 strategy. What are some of the key success factors, in your opinion, would it be for a country to be considered a partner for China +1 factory, right? Or the China +1 strategy? That's my question.
Sure.
And you could relate to investment climate, that sort of thing. I mean, if you want.
Yeah, no, and for anybody that's not familiar with that term of China +1, I mean, just looking at, if you have investments in China, where else in the region might you want to invest to keep your supply chains as resilient as possible? I think we saw a lot of this even before COVID, where there definitely were companies that were looking for other partners in the region. You had a lot of movement into Vietnam, a lot of movement into Malaysia, some movement into Thailand and the Philippines. And so, I think that those companies were making those decisions for company reasons. Maybe it was due to cost, maybe it was due to logistics, maybe it was due to where their markets were. And I think for the most part, those kinds of decisions should be made on a commercial basis, right? But I think then as COVID came in, that really also reminded, I think, all of us about the need to have, a resiliency plan in place, so that if one part of the supply chain was shut down, you had other ways that you could source goods. And of course, I know that issue hit MSMEs probably harder than anybody, right? Because you did have a situation where you weren't able to get the things that you needed to be able to get. I think when we saw during the COVID pandemic is you had economies like Malaysia really step up. You had economies like Vietnam and Indonesia really step up. And so I think that engagement with economies in Southeast Asia is really important. But also, I think we expanded our economic engagement with so many other partners around the region, whether it was Japan and Korea or Australia and New Zealand, looking at what are the different ways we can do this. Taiwan as well, and they're also an APEC member. So, I think that there's certainly been success stories in different sectors in terms of, having another place where you can invest. And again, I think this is why it's so important in APEC that we're talking to all of the partners, that it's not just about China, but there's a bunch of different opportunities around the region. And I hope that, U.S. companies are also looking at different opportunities around the region, because there are certainly some growing industry in places like Malaysia or Vietnam or elsewhere, where there certainly are opportunities for U.S. companies. And if there are opportunities there, that's great for all of us.
Speech and answers. Thank you. Now I would like to move to our panel discussion. So I'd like to invite our panelists to come forward, and then please be seated. And while we're use our today's distinguished panel moderator, Professor Landry Sine. Professor Sine is a renowned expert in academia, policy, and the business arena, boasting an impressive background that includes affiliation with esteemed institutions such as Thunderbird, Stanford, Oxford University, and the World Economic Forum, among many others. His achievements are so vast and far-reaching that it becomes challenging for me to summarize them in a brief introduction. I encourage you to explore his detailed biography on our website. But it's worth noting that the Professor Sine holds the distinction of having received fastest reported tenure and promotion to the highest rank of a full professor in the history of U.S. universities within his discipline. I'm very privileged to have you as our panel moderator. And with that, Professor Sine, now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Mi-jung. Hello again, everyone. Fantastic. I love the energy. So let me begin by expressing my gratitude to our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Murray, for the fabulous and insightful engagement. So we are very grateful. And we enthusiastically look forward to continuing the collaboration with the other and additional engagements. So I would also like to express my gratitude to the Global Chamber, Executive Director Doug, Mijong, and team as well. So we are very fortunate to partner with you. And this will not have been possible without also the commitment of Jean Kagram. When he invited me to join Thunderbird, he said, Landry, you will be joining the most entrepreneurial global educational institutions. And of course, we will say no to Jean Kagram when he asks for something. Believe it or not, in less than 3 years, I have participated to the launch of more than 5 new programs. In most other universities, it takes 3 years to discuss whether we should launch a program or no. So Jean Kagram is really a stellar leader. Of course, here, we have incredibly distinguished speakers. So for a unique panel assembled by Mijong and team. And let me share a few words about each of them. I cannot read the entire bio. If I do so, we'll be here until the day after tomorrow. So yeah. So let me start with Brenda. So Brenda Arrington is president and founder of Adaptive Leadership Strategies. And she has worked extensively with leaders worldwide in terms of global organization to provide insight and coaching in terms of development facilitator, among others. Peter Grabiek, who is the vice president, Global Recovery Group. So we were speaking about the various countries in which we have lived. So he have lived and worked in about 5 years. So, and of course, with his work related to bringing value to clients in terms of due diligence, asset recovery, trade, project finance, among others. Jennifer Clinton, president and CEO of Cultural Vista. So she has devoted her career to international education and business because of a deep passion for bridging cultures, people, and idea. We share that passion, Jennifer. We also have Tarun Chopra, president and CEO of Clemens Worldwide. And he's an award-winning Fortune 500 global business leader. So just that, you know. So yeah, we are very fortunate to have you. We also have Chris Bennett, founder of the social impact startup TIL. So his goal is really to democratize intellectual property rights for marginalized and underrepresented entrepreneurs. So as I mentioned, so we can't stay here for a very long time, perhaps a sentence or two of your bio. But one thing which is really important, let's probably to get started, what does APEC mean to you? And can you share some successful story or key trends? And let me start with Peter.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you everyone for your time and attention. I think that Senior Official Murray gave a very good overview of APEC provides and the potential it has. It's a non-binding entity, but it provides a lot of room for dialogue for government, private sector, and academia to inform the conversation moving forward. One of the results of that may be things as trade policy, and we have seen the conversation over the last few decades inform policies within the region, such as RCEP, for example. But I think that these workshops are also very important as they provide that framework and that opportunity for the needs of businesses throughout the communities to kind of filter and inform the policy. And there's a lot of institutions which have institutional knowledge within the United States, for example, SBA, Department of Commerce and International Trade Administration, several that have institutional knowledge. And then of course, there's the SMEs out there that are out there actually working within the marketplace. And I think that threading good communication from the SME level to the institutional level to inform initiatives such as this, to ultimately inform policy and shape the future. I think that's very much the core and the opportunity for a program like this.
Fantastic. Christopher, 30% of your clients are around Asia. Can you elaborate also more on the meaningfulness of APEC for you and share some successful stories?
Yeah, thank you for that, Landry. The way we look at the world is there's in fact like a pyramid. At the top is a global environment, which we have regions like Asia, which are extremely important economically. We work at the bottom, the individual, small and medium enterprise level, like in Asia. We have clients and we also have resources in South Korea, in Singapore, Vietnam, and other places. We work with them to attach the most democratic piece of commerce, innovation. It's something you have if you're a farm in Singapore, or if you're a technology developer. So with that framework, APEC is in the middle, capturing rules, processes, and policies to transfer that knowledge in those businesses up to the global level and enable trade that can benefit everyone. And so we work with clients from e-commerce platforms, artificial intelligence developers, blockchain organizations, and digital services providers, as well as the traditional manufacturing, to empower them to contribute to that overall process. And APEC is a key enabler to that. I'll yield back.
Fabulous. Love this. Taryn, you are present in more than 170 countries around the globe. And how is it different in APEC compared to other regions?
Sure. The way we look at it, we consider ourselves a mid-market business ourselves. So we are a small, medium size. We fit into that category. And being a business person, I view APEC as the growth engine of the next decade. Okay. As Europe struggles with its challenges right now, APEC is where we look forward to. A lot of technological development, a lot of a much younger population, so very growth hungry, and they want to come out, right? And they want to take on the world and be the leaders that they have the potential to be. So I view it purely as that economic lens or the growth lens. That's where, if I were to place my bet from a growth perspective, that's where it would be. When it comes to success stories, we are in insurance, which is about anything else. And I've used this example before, but the prophet on CNBC, Martin Monis, which he talks about for any you need three key ingredients, which is people, product, process. Okay, if you have good people, good product, good process, you're bound to be successful. So as everybody looks towards growth, the other side of that story is, how do you protect those assets, right? So how do you protect your people? Do you provide the right healthcare for your employees and all the benefits? How do you protect your intellectual property? How do you, that's part of your product. How do you, protect yourself from willful or, unwillful acts, errors, omissions, fraud? And so our success stories are around protection of individuals or organizations in Asia Pacific. One of the examples that I would use is in Myanmar, a very, very closed economy. Okay, very stringent government. How do you get, how do you conduct business, and how do you make sure that the business is successful? And so we've got instances where we've been able to work with our clients in helping them set up or in that jurisdiction, as well as when something went wrong, the ability to bring those individuals back or those assets out of the country.
Fabulous. You mentioned people. Jennifer, part of your work is really development. Can you elaborate how you prepare SMEs to be future ready when it comes to do business with APEC?
Thank you. Yeah, so as Dr. Signe mentioned, our business as Cultural Vistas, we're in the space of developing human talent and human capabilities and understanding. So we see that it's critically important. APEC really provides that framework for individuals to be motivated or companies to be motivated to really engage with one another. And where does that start? It starts at the individual level of building knowledge and connections and awareness of opportunities in other places. So what we do is really help build both mobility and skill development. So moving people around the world, around to different countries throughout the APEC community to experience firsthand what a market is like, working in a company, working in an SME, to contribute to that SME, but also to bring back when they return home, what the knowledge that they've developed and built into their company. So the success stories really point to when an individual, either from South Korea, we work a lot with South Korea, bringing young people into the U.S. to do internships and short-term assignments in companies, where we see innovation happening within that company because they've built new knowledge and technical expertise about the economy, and start some new product as a result of that experience. So it's wonderful to see that.
Oh, I love this story. And this connects us well also with Brenda. So would you mind elaborating also about some successful story of cultural competencies? And I know you were also connected with the global mindset inventory of Thunderbird.
Thunderbird, yes, thank you so much. So when we think about opportunities expand globally, one of the most important things is the connections and the people. We've heard from Mr. Murray the term collaboration. We've talked about communication, and that all relies on our ability to communicate with each other effectively and interact with each other.
I am today though, tonight. I am tonight though. I'm going to a marketing society.
Okay.
Can't have a conference nowadays.
No.
So what you are saying was so interesting that people want to connect with you, Brenda. So please go ahead.
When I think of what APEC is doing, I think of it as an example of what is possible when there is intention behind facilitating trade strategically and making it more accessible. But we have to be mindful of global mindset. How do we interact with people who are very different from us? And how do we make that a component of our strategy when we are looking to establish a presence in other regions? You ask about a success story. As SMEs, we have to measure twice, cut once. We don't have the opportunity even to fail fast in many cases. And a lot of times people overlook or they set aside the necessity to really establish the appropriate relationships, whether they're going in directly or indirectly. And that is the most important thing to do, in my opinion. And when I've seen people take that step back and take a different approach and really focus on the relationships, things take a 180-degree turn. You really need to know if when you're saying yes, it means no. And when you have those blind spots, they create substantial barriers to what you're trying to achieve.
Fabulous. So, Karen, what are some of the biggest opportunities for American SMEs? So I'm certain many members of our audience would like to know about some of those opportunities.
You mean from a
in your industry? Oh, yes, from a US perspective in your industry and in the product sector.
I mean, the very fact that these are developing economies, there's definitely an opportunity from a technology transfer standpoint. you can bring the latest ideas, latest technology, and make sure that they're embraced and get the penetration that you're looking for. That definitely would be one that I would, that we do see as an opportunity. As I said, are developing economies, so your general in terms can be what can be sold in those countries. It's just as the lifestyle starts to go up, as you can see, luxury business is doing very well in Asia Pacific in general, and all the luxury brands are just reaping the benefits because the economies are opening up and there's more disposable income. So the real opportunity is what share of disposable income can you get? Okay, and that's where if the business is focused on as to how can I get that share, that creates a lot of opportunity.
Fabulous. Chris, what is your perspective on the opportunities for American SMEs in the APEC region?
Thank you, Landry. And I want to build on what you said, because we look at it at an organic level. I was just stepping back and considering all the options for all the populations. And that sounds broad, but I'll tell you why. Briefly sat in on a meeting of the Indian Institute of Human Settlements this morning. And there was a professor, I think Ajay Shah, discussing their potential impact of artificial intelligence. And his perspective that he shared was, he thought it would take countries that were developing who needed skilled workers up pretty significantly because they'll have access to resources from generative AI if it's relevant. He also thought it would benefit developed nations who have a significant level of expertise, but more enhanced generative AI will allow them to also improve. What we're seeing is that as folks become aware and have access to these technologies, they can innovate in ways that are not traditionally limiting. So we would strongly suggest folks step back and say, how can we benefit our individuals and also our country policies in moving forward economically and working together? So we're seeing it across the board.
Fabulous. Brenda?
I think the opportunity is really to involve yourselves in meetings and forums like Chris just described, and really immerse yourself to understand about the opportunities that align with what you're trying to do. What's interesting is that we found that there are some ideas for export and products and services that might not have conspicuous appeal, I'll say, in other markets. And so you really have to peel back and understand what the appetite is, or what the tolerance is on some level, and what the opportunity really looks like. It might be very different, and today it is very different than it might have been 3 or 4 years ago. And so I think that it's about doing your homework and doing due diligence, and really, I'll say, aligning with people that casting that is possible, and aligning with people that you might not have expected to communicate with.
Due diligence, extremely important. I connect this with Peter, and especially when it comes to financing. What are the opportunities for American SMEs to receive financial resources for their development?
Yeah, absolutely, and excellent conversation. I do think that the opportunities are in areas such as trade. In my purview, it's trade, finance, and maybe projects. And on the trade side, Global Chamber founder Doug Brunke had mentioned some figures about, the of U.S. companies, and then half of those and half of those it's either Mexico. And that just brought to mind some of the experiences that I've had and that we've had working with firms across the country. And we've worked with so many U.S. firms, SMEs, that are maybe on the larger end of the SME side. Maybe they'll clear 50 million a year, that only do domestic work. And when you look at firms around the world, just trying to find one of those might be a challenge. Almost every firm of any size and scale. So that just kind of illustrates, how much more U.S. firms and U.S. innovation can do in national markets. And I think a lot of that is simply just, having the focus, understanding the risks better, and incorporating the best practices which are out there. But it's a matter of of getting those conversations started and bringing those best practices to entities that are ready to scale up in a manner that is economical, in a manner that can move forward. On the finance side specifically, there are tools and resources out there that can help firms effectively loosen up their cash flow and make it easier on their imports to buy from them. Letters of credit is one example. There are things such as receivable finance, which you can get through, Ex-Im Bank in the United States and various export credit agencies. We work very much in this space. And then on the project side, this is an area where SMEs, small to medium-sized entities that are scaling up, can work with partners and consortium. They can integrate more within supply chains. They can work with public-private partnerships, possibly even work with in some larger projects that are happening overseas as kind of a part of those activities. So those are the three areas that I would focus on.
Fantastic. And before giving the floor to Jennifer, so I want to mention to the member of our virtual audience that you can ask questions and they will be sent to me later during the Q&A session. So we think about you, send your questions to us. So what are some of the opportunities?
I would say from the US perspective, SMEs, one thing that we hear a lot is just access to individuals that know foreign markets in the APEC region. And immigration here, as we know, is very, very challenging. Our colleagues at the State Department have actually been doing a lot of work in the visa space, particularly in the J1 visa world that you may or may not be familiar with, in making it easier to bring STEM talent into the United States. And that's an area that we work on and helping companies access this foreign talent through the J1 visa process. And there's a lot of effort and initiative going into that. And I would also say that there's a huge opportunity already in the US where across the United States and in academic institutions, 42% of all PhDs in the STEM fields are foreign nationals. We have the ability through our cultural vistas to convert those individuals from in the academic institution into a company and working there for up to 5 years, which is a big deal. And that really opens up doors for that knowledge exchange, for that expertise on those foreign markets to come in and really help be a catalyst for SMEs here in the United States to really access that talent.
Fabulous. And you can keep the mic, Jennifer. My final question to you will be, what are some of the challenges or risks that American companies, especially SMEs, may face when doing business in the APEC region? And which strategies would you recommend for success?
So challenges, from our perspective, is really about finding the right people and the right partners. And it's easy to fail. And as Brenda was talking about, not going into a relationship with the right mindset. From our perspective, being able to pursue maybe lower risk talent acquisition strategies, for example, for shorter term, 1 year, 2 year, up to 5 year stints where you can bring an individual into your workplace, not go for a whole expensive H-1B green card process, but test somebody out for an internship or a short-term experience that really will maybe mitigate against the risk of making a bad decision on hiring or a bad decision on going full force of trying to seek a longer-term visa.
Fantastic, Darren.
Sure. So I have a lawyer friend and he specializes in high net worth clients and obviously he takes care of all their business needs. But once in a while, one of them gets married. And so his advice when getting married is think of divorce before you marry. Because there's a mistake. And the implication here is before you're going into country, specifically into APEC, think of what can go wrong, right? So you need to do your homework before you go in. We conduct a lot of research. We do a lot of surveys with our clients and prospects in the mid-market space. And you know, the number one risk that was identified by those entities, going back to what Mr. Murray, you said, they want to be, digital economy. Number one risk, cyber, right? From ransomware to data breaches and everything else in between. Number two risk, business interruptions. So whether it's because of supply chain interruptions, inflation, economic conditions, so on and so forth. But every country is different. For example, China, number one risk, changes in legislation. Number two risk, business interruptions. Japan, number one risk is cyber. And number two risk is actually natural calamities. That's what the country, the clients who are operating in those countries are telling us. Same thing, Singapore is actually more like the word, cyber and business interruption. So know before you go, right? Do your homework before you show up.
Fantastic, Brenda.
This is going to sound like Groundhog Day, but first of all, avoid making emotional decisions. We all get very excited and about things that we want to do, and we move too far too fast. So that's the first thing. But don't think of it as being transactional, and really be clear in the fact that none of this is linear, okay? It's a very circuitous process. Do I go in directly? Do I go in indirectly? Do I need a sponsor? And it really is about doing your homework, as my colleagues have said, but paying attention to those relationships, understanding your starting point is. Thunderbird, we talk about social, psychological, and intellectual capital, right? When we talk about global mindset. So understand where your starting point is and do the things that you need to do to be able to make those necessary and meaningful connections to sustain your ideas.
Fantastic, Peter.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. So in the context of APEC, I'm thinking of this, and I'm thinking of it from one, the evolving policy space, which APEC can address, and then two, the operational space, which individual SMEs, individual small entities need to address. And I think that the biggest challenge is, so one of them that we see is regulatory divergence, right? And we see this especially in areas such as food, medicine, innovative industries. There are just different regulatory frameworks. On the policy level, you can move towards some form of harmonization. I think models for that, and these might be a little bit wonky, are things like the harmonized tariff schedule or ISO, and some of these detailed frameworks. On the policy side, I think Tara kind of said, do your homework, implement the best practices, know what you're getting into. That can be a challenge. The other big ones in the context of APEC, one of them is data localization. I think in the connectivity and the information technology space, that's a challenging one. A lot of countries want to localize data for various reasons, and then there is an economies of scale benefit when you localize it and one then provide platforms and services from that space. So you run into that challenge of whether or not things make economic sense, scale on a case-by-case basis. And then the last one is intellectual property rights protection. And I think that this is a big one for innovation in general, for all of us. We run into a situation where everybody is waiting for someone else to innovate, and then I can just take and use that. Everybody is sitting at the table doing the same thing, waiting for someone else to move first, and that creates stagnation. And one of the things that intellectual property rights provides is it provides the incentives for the research and innovation, for the research and development and innovation that will actually lead to progress in technology. And so I think that there's a very, very much an opportunity to harmonize in that space in order to get very, very broad benefits for all of us, and to include a lot of the inputs that other countries can bring to the table in getting more diverse perspectives and more creativity into the innovative space.
And last but not least, Chris.
Well, thank you for that. And I get the benefit of having listened to all those very scholarly and on-point answers. So I'll be very direct. In candor, the risk is abject, horrible failure that costs you a lot of money and creates a lot of problems. I mean, that's the real side. what the speaker told us is there are ways to mitigate that risk. But I would say there's a greater risk than that, and that is of not engaging, because what will happen is your competitors and others will engage in the marketplace and gain strategic advantages. So I would say that the upside greatly outweighs the risk, and folks should be participating in APEC and other global forums.
That is wonderful. So let me turn now to products. Do you have any questions for us? Yes, sir. I'll take 3 questions on the row. So, sir, and then ma'am there.
I think I could try it without a microphone.
We want the people who are online to be able to hear as well.
Thank you to everybody for the informative presentations. My question has to do with the visa applications, the business visa applications. My company, WCS, specializes in processing documents and having documents authenticated at the U.S. Department of State. And in the pandemic period, and indeed in the post-pandemic period, we've experienced a sharp increase in the amount of time it takes for processing at the Department of State. And I understand that passport applicant for the pipeline having become so full and so long. So my question is whether a similar experience has occurred with business visa applications.
And are you asking a question for a specific speaker, or perhaps you?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm terrible with names sometimes, but I think you spoke about visa applications.
Okay, great. Ma'am there, I will take 3 questions.
But my question is for Jennifer. I'm curious because I'm thinking about my clients, my small and medium-sized companies. I work up here in Northern Virginia. So could some theoretically get a intern from another country, have them work in Virginia in their headquarters for a year, and then potentially send them to be their full-time person in their country? Is that what you're suggesting? And has that happened? Have you had that happen? I'm curious to hear an example about that.
Fantastic. And we can take a 3rd question. And I also want to mention that senior official Murray can also take questions. So, okay, Jennifer.
I'll take the first one. We don't deal so much in the business visas, but I'll just share our experience similar to what you described last, 2 years, very, very challenging. But we've seen, I'd say over the last 8 months, a significant decrease in the time that it's taking. So I know the State Department has put a lot of investment into this. There's been a lot of attention to it on Capitol Hill, for sure. I think it probably, I don't know if Matt can speak to this, but it will probably be another 6 months or so before it really gets cleared up. But we're seeing good progress on that front, and a lot of good communication through the offices that we work with that liaise with the consular offices. To your other question on, so yes, that's possible. We see that all the time, where an intern gets, a foreign national is coming working in the US for up to a year and then gets hired by that company back when they return home. So yes.
Fantastic. We have another question here.
Oh, thank you so much. Because you mentioned that we can also math. So I would take this opportunity to ask one question. First of all, my name is Ann Wing. Companies a global trade facilitator between US and Vietnam. And if you look at the back here with the success story, I was humbled to work for VinFast, the very first electric vehicle company. They will, for your information, they will have a groundbreaking ceremony on 28th July. So I want to direct my question to Matt. Thank you so much for coming to us
for the engagement and help us understanding better about APEC. So when we mention about sustainability, so what will come next after APEC when US conclude the host role? Will we expect some activities like this in 2024 or in the upcoming years? And would you mind sharing a little bit of the post-APEC plan in terms of personal or any kind of professional engagement?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think one of the things we've worked very hard to do is to place our host year within the arc of the APEC, calendar from year to year to year to year, and the APEC agenda from year to year to year, because we know that we only have 1 year to help set the agenda. So we've worked very hard to connect with Thailand and its host year last year and trying to carry forward a lot of their priorities. And Peru will be the host next year. And so we're working very closely with Peru to try to carry forward many of these things. But one of the key things we really want to get back to in APEC is the importance of public-private sector collaboration. I think that's so important. And that's been something that's been hard to do the last few years because of the COVID pandemic and everything else. So that's something I think there's pretty widespread agreement or that we've heard from a lot of the other APEC economies. So we hope that a lot of things can be carried forward into next year as well. But it's certainly our goal. This doesn't stop on November the 18th or whatever it is. We finish in San Francisco, but it really is, we'll continue this into next year to try to carry forward, many of these same initiatives through APEC. And if I could just address the question on visas real quickly, absolutely, sir, it's a huge challenge. And I would equate to it, I'm not a consular visa officer, but I'm an economic officer. But a lot of the challenges are the same as what we've seen with some of the supply chains, where you went down to zero production and zero staff, and then all of a sudden everything ramped up very quickly, exponentially, and so you have that pent up demand. The State Department's doing a lot of things right now to reposition resources around the world so that some of our busiest visa posts are getting more officers there, and then also extending hours either into evenings or weekends to process out as many as possible, because one of the big bottlenecks is the appointments and being able to get people actually through the embassies and consulates overseas. So as Jennifer said, it's a better situation than it was several months ago, but everyone at the department acknowledges, from the secretary on down, acknowledges there's still a lot of work to do. And so we do, our colleagues out there are really working hard to try to make that happen, because again, we recognize that the biggest cost here is to companies like yourselves and trying to have that kind of engagement. And if you're looking to just bring 2 people in from overseas, you're really depending on those 2 people, and then you can't get them here. That's a real impediment to business. So we certainly want to try to address those problems.
Document authentication as well.
I don't have any background on document authentication, unfortunately, so I apologize for that. Could I ask the panel one question?
Of course.
Because again, as I said earlier, I love coming to these things because I learn way more than any possibly learn from anything that I say. So this was another example of why I should have stopped talking after about 2.5 minutes in my remarks and just turned it back, because that was a great discussion and I really loved all the different examples. I just wanted to ask, anyone up there or all of you or whatever, you got into a couple of the sort of the digital challenges at the end, the cyber challenge, the data localization challenge, the intellectual property rights challenge. As was said in my bio, I've spent time out in China, so I've been battling with a lot of these things for many years. Just would love to hear a little bit more from panelists about kind of both challenges and opportunities in the digital space, because we do hear every company is a digital company, and that includes SMEs. Certainly coming out of COVID, there are new challenges and new opportunities. And we're about to go into a whole month's worth of engagements where that's going to be a real focus for us. So I'd really love to ground truth and maybe crowdsource here a little bit of our agenda over the next month. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Peter, do you want to go first?
I can say a little bit more about, I can say a little bit more about the things that we've seen in that space. So on the digital space, one side of it is companies just deal with a lot of uncertainty, especially not knowing what the framework is out there. And I think in the digital space, there's, okay, I apologize. I think in the digital space, especially, there's more of a fear and unintended consequences if you go out there and you stumble around and then you find where the roadblocks are. And I think that there's particular industries where US firms have significant core competition might make it easier. I think the most obvious one there is something like cybersecurity, where you'll work domestically, but why would you put your foot out there if you don't? If you're going to be the pioneer, the old joke is pioneers are the ones that get arrows in their back or something along those lines. So these are all areas where increased a clearer framework would just provide the space for firms to go in there and make better decisions and to make it easier to take risks, because some risks right now I think are just too uncertain. Chris, did you have some thoughts? Go ahead.
I want to compliment what Peter said with an observation. First of all, actually did the digital service piece. That's how we got 30% of our clients in Asia, and we have a small percentage in Africa, and we're going in the Middle East. The key thing that we found, and this is backed by our research that we did funded by the National Science Foundation through a program through George Washington University. The best thing you can give a small, medium enterprise is the right solution at the right price at the right time. And if you can do that, the best way to do that is through partnerships. So we believe that what APEC puts in place, as well as the risk and opportunities, is the potential to interconnect, part of the theme, partnerships that give entrepreneurs and SMEs the right solution at the right price at the right time. It meets them where they are and helps them succeed. And that's a direct experience that we've had as an organization. And it also is probably fairly pervasive amongst the 100 or so clients that we have in different places.
You had a question?
No, I just had a comment.
I'm close.
To you, make sure our framework, the FDA or privacy, any other similar world makes things so much easier. So that our FDA works with their FDA, all that sort of stuff.
For the online audience. So great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So Taran, I know that you wanted to say something about this question.
Yeah, just so very quickly, the way we look at it, every risk is an opportunity as well. So let's first talk about the risks. In our experience, there are two risks related to digital. Okay, the first one is the small to medium-sized firms do not have the wherewithal, they do not have the investment, they do not have the resources to protect themselves. Okay, so that's why cyber becomes a big issue if you go digital, you have to accept that cyber risk as well. The second risk related to that is data. And I'm not just talking, data security, or it's where the data resides, because every government, every regulator is now being very protective about where that data resides. And so to me, those are the two risks. And then the opportunity becomes something similar to what Chris was talking about. It is about the ability to provide those services to counter these risks is where I see the biggest opportunity. So if you are a firm, in the technology field, and you are providing, cybersecurity, cyber assessment, cyber protection, the new term is cyber hygiene. If you're doing that, that's where the opportunity is.
Fantastic. And just before you speak, I want to add the questions received online, which is, can APEC do for smaller SMEs but no financial sufficiency for US market entry cost, from Prof. Ansis?
Well, thank you for that. Those are my peeps out there asking that question. I want to just mention this is so essential now, especially in the environment of generative AI and all the different deep fake type models. The governments in good faith can provide a level of trust that is probably not as accessible amongst organizations. So that's one key piece. As far, there is an element potential for trust in intellectual property rights when you use technologies like blockchain and other things that fake and more difficult to misappropriate. Also, we have pretty strong international norms and treaties in place for patents and trademarks and other types of copyrights that can be leveraged. These entrepreneurs with the resources who can support them. And there is, in my opinion, from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the United States Constitution, no more accessible democratic capability than an individual to create something that's inventive or useful and use that to improve their aspirations and their situation. Great opportunity to have representatives in your team.
On this note, what a wonderful way to conclude panel. Please give a round of applause our distinguished panel. I'm giving the floor back to our distinguished executive director, Misha.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sine. We went over the scheduled time, but I think we're engaging. And thank you so much to our esteemed keynote speaker, Mr. Murray, and outstanding panelists and moderator, and generous event sponsors. And let us again applaud them for one more time. Mr. Murray, we extend our sincerest wishes for the success of APEC 2023 in November, and we assure you that you have our support and enthusiasm from the entire community. And your dedication to empowering us is really instrumental in enabling us to flourish on world like today. So thank you very much for what you do. And now with that, it's time for lunch and networking. So we encourage everyone exchange and then have business card as many as possible, and also have a meaningful connections. And thank you again and engage in this fascinating conversation. And thank you.
And for the panelists and our distinguished keynote speaker, we'll have an official picture here. So if you just can allow us to have the official picture before we join you. Thank you so much again.
Just like hanging out a word right there. My son won one. Yeah. That's our right? I'm like, yeah. So yes.